Historically speaking, women almost always have been excluded from the socio-political spheres. They have never found their ideas and voices being expressed in different kinds of things. They have always been relegated to a subordinate position in the household, and they have always been taught to serve their husbands and families. So women were never taught to prioritize themselves. Educating a woman has never been very popular. But when the print culture was making its way to the Indian subcontinent and it was establishing itself in the subcontinent, different kinds of printed materials were now being spread among the masses. New ideas were being circulated. In our last lesson, we talked about how reformist ideas that questioned women's position in the society were also being spread among the masses. So women now found that their oppressed status was being acknowledged and their oppressed and subordinate status in the society was in the point of being addressed. Now all this happened because of the spread of reformist ideas. Now when these reformist ideas were spreading among the masses, many sections of the society underwent a true sense of enlightenment. That is to say, they realized that women should not be treated like nobodies. They should not be relegated to the households, to the kitchens where they never got to learn about the bigger wide world. And so, many liberal fathers and husbands now began educating women. So, home education now began for women. And at the same time, many women were also allowed to go to schools. Now, this was a major moment in the history of the Indian subcontinent because institutional education has never been accessible to women. Even homeschooling was also not accessible to women. They were always taught to be obedient wives and husbands, but now, because of the spread of reformist ideas, they were now able to educate themselves. They were now in the process of being liberated. Around this time, many journals were also being published. And what was the content of these journals? Well, these now laid stress on the importance of women's education in the process of enlightening and liberating them. Because it is with education that you get to know about many new things. The windows of your minds are opened only when you gain knowledge and education. Without education, without gaining knowledge, you will never be able to proceed in life. And at this juncture, it was realized that women's education was very crucial in order to bring women enlightenment and liberation from the oppressive clutches of the societies. Now, do you think all the sections of the society were very liberal and they were welcoming the reformist ideas? Most definitely not. In our last lesson, we talked about how the Hindu orthodoxy wanted to maintain the existent social order. It wanted to shield the traditional practices. Now, that was a discussion we had in the context of religion. Likewise, even when it came to the question of women's educations, there were many conservative sections in different religions. The conservative Hindus believed that a literate girl would be widowed, and there were conservative Muslims as well who feared that educated women would be corrupted by reading Urdu romances. So, the conservative Hindus were of the opinion that if a woman is literate, that person will be able to claim her rights. That person will be able to vocalize her opinions. And in the process of this, she will either be widowed or rejected by her husband. And these conservative Muslims feared that if women get to read about new things, their minds would be corrupted by reading the Urdu romances. So these were the ideas that were propagated by the conservative sections of the society. But do you think that women could be held back any longer after the introduction of the reformist ideas and new ways of thinking which were facilitated by the print technology? Well, it was not so, because there were many defiant and rebellious women who rebelled against these orthodox views to attain education. Now, once they saw that there were new avenues opening up before them, there was no force to hold back these rebellious and defiant women, because they were now wanting to be liberated from the cages, so to speak. They were no longer willing to remain oppressed within the household and stay within the kitchen itself. So they were now wanting to educate themselves. Now, in this regard, mention must be made of a young girl named Rasha Sundari Devi, who hailed from early 19th century Bengal. Now, Rasha Sundari Devi was not educated initially, and she got married in a very orthodox and oppressive household. All she was meant to do was spend her entire life in the kitchen. This was all she was supposed to do in order to take care of her household, in order to take care of her husband and her children. But it was in the secrecy of the kitchen that Rasha Sundari Devi now started educating herself. So, Rasha Sundari Devi now started reading new books in the kitchen itself, and in the year 1876, she published her autobiography called Amar Jibon, and it is the first full-length autobiography in Bengali. Now, as the name Amar Jibon suggests, which means my life in English, we can understand that this autobiography was all about her hardships, her struggles, and her experiences of being married in an oppressive household. And it also recorded her experiences as to how she educated herself in the kitchen and went on to writing the first full-length autobiography in Bengali. Now, before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. Whose autobiography called Amar Jibon was the first full-length autobiography to be published in Bengali? Was it the autobiography of Rasha Sundari Devi, Mahashweta Devi, Swarna Kumari Devi, or Ashapurna Devi? Which of these do you think is the correct answer? Well, the correct answer is Rasha Sundari Devi. It was Rasha Sundari Devi's autobiography called Amar Jivan, which is the first full-length autobiography to be published in Bengali. Now, when we talk about women wanting to read, educate, enlighten and liberate themselves, we should also talk about many women like Kailashbashini Devi. Now, from the 1860s, Bengali women like Kailashbashini Devi began to write about their experiences. And while they were doing so, they now brought to the fore and brought before the masses their imprisoned status within the household. They also talked about how they were left in ignorance and treated unjustly by those members of the family whom they were meant to serve. So they were never really given education, which is why they were left in the clutches of ignorance. And without education, these women were also not able to reflect on their subordinate and imprisoned status in the household. The rebellious streak of questioning and challenging was never birthed in their minds. All they did was taking care of the household. But now few women were writing about their lives, their experiences, their struggles and the hardships that they faced as women in India. Now, the late 19th century witnessed many feminist activists voicing their opinions on women's position in the Indian subcontinent. And in this regard, we should definitely mention Tarabai Shinde and Pandita Ramabai. Now, they hailed from the present day Indian state of Maharashtra. And 1880s onwards, women like these, as in these feminist activists, were writing about patriarchal domination within the household. Now, what do we understand by patriarchal domination? By the ideology of patriarchy, we mean that the man gets the upper hold in everything, be that in the society, in politics, in laws, in government, in culture, or even within the household. And patriarchy assigned and ascribed a very subordinate and imprisoned position to women. And these feminist activists were now voicing their opinion, because they have been severely enraged for many centuries, but in the absence of any medium, they were not able to vocalize their opinions. But their ideas were now being spread among the masses, because different kinds of printed materials were now being published. Along with writing about patriarchal domination, they also wrote how miserable the lives of upper caste Hindu women were, and especially of the widows, because the widows were the ones who were not allowed to participate in any kind of social activity. They were not even treated like proper human beings in the households. And these upper caste Hindu women were subject to many kinds of unjust and oppressive practices. So together, all these things were now being addressed by these feminist activists. Now, while we talk about the addressing of women's position in the Indian subcontinent, as well as feminism gaining importance among the masses, we should definitely make a mention of the educationist, feminist and political activist Begum Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain. Now, in the Bengal Women's Education Conference in the year 1926, she condemned how men attempt to withhold women from attaining education, because at that point of time, men used to be of the opinion that women will be corrupted if they attend education. Now, in this regard, Begum Rokeya questioned that if men are not corrupted by the influence of education and new ideas, why would women be so? She was a very liberal feminist thinker, and she was vocalizing her opinions. She was fighting for women's rights. Now, in the last lesson, we talked about how different kinds of printed materials were also being published in the vernacular languages. And during this time, Hindi printing also began in the Indian subcontinent. Now, when Hindi printing began from the 1870s, a large part was devoted to discussing issues in the likes of women's education, widow remarriage, national movement, and short stories and serialized novels were also being published. So, these Hindi printed materials were also addressing the question of women's education. They were stressing on the importance of women's education in the process of liberating and really enlightening women. And at the same time, they were also questioning the issue of widow remarriage, because earlier on, widows were not allowed to remarry. They had to leave a subordinate position. They had to live a very secluded life in the society. But widow remarriage was a thing that was being questioned in these Hindi printed materials. These Hindi printed materials also wrote about the national movement that was being fought against the British colonial rule. And various kinds of short stories and serialized novels were also being printed. Now, these were meant for providing entertainment to those women who stayed in their homes. Now, we should definitely mention Munshi Premchand in this regard. Munshi Premchand was a very famous Hindi writer who wrote about different kinds of social issues. Now, in this regard, we should mention the very famous Hindi writer Munshi Premchand. Munshi Premchand wrote about different kinds of social issues like women's position in the society, or even caste discriminations that were prevalent in various societies throughout the Indian subcontinent. Here on the screen, we can see two books which are written by Munshi Premchand. One book reads Pratigya, and the other is Nirmala. From this, we can understand that these books are devoted to the experiences of women's lives in the Indian subcontinent. Now, printed materials were taking different kinds of shapes and dimensions, as we have been discussing all along. In Bengal, in an entire area in central Calcutta that was known as Batala, new kinds of books were being printed, and these books were very popular. These printed religious tracts, scriptures, as well as other everyday subjects which were often considered obscene. So various kinds of things were being printed in Batala, which is a place in central Calcutta. Here you can see how it is an image of the goddess Durga with her children that has been printed by this Batala school of painting. And here you can see how daily lives and women's oppression at the hands of men have been printed. Now this Batala school of painting became very popular over time. Now let us continue the line of discussion that we have been pursuing all this while. Reformist ideas gave women the space to vocalize their opinions, and their oppressed status in the society was now being addressed. They were gaining education, and with that education and knowledge they were able to question the existing social order. But there were many sections of the society who wanted to shield men's authority. They did not want the reformist ideas to spread among the masses, and specifically the women, which in turn would mean overthrowing of the existing patriarchal order. And to this end, from the early 20th century, a man called Ramchandra now began publishing literature by the name of Istri Dharm Vichar. Now just by looking at the name of this literature, we can understand what it was all about. Istri Dharm Vichar means that it postulated how women should behave, how a stree or a wife is supposed to behave and conduct herself in the household. Now this folk literature was intended to teach women how to be obedient wives and remain subjugated to their husbands, because these men were the ones who did not want women to liberate themselves. Because if women had liberated themselves, they would have begun questioning the patriarchal order. And men like Ramchandra wanted women to remain obedient to their husbands. They wanted women to remain subjugated to their husbands. Let us now look at these images. Here you can see this man is robed in a groom's attire, and this small girl is robed in a bride's attire. Now this man looks almost like a father to this bride, and despite this age difference, this is the bride to this groom. So we can understand how small young girls were married off to really aged men, and then they were expected to remain obedient and subjugated to their husbands. Now this image also shows you that this woman is quite young, despite which she already has a child to take care of. So these were the ways in which these kind of popular literature wanted women to remain relegated to the household. So they were not supposed to question these kinds of oppressive ways of living. Now in the same light, the Khalsa Tract Society also published cheap booklets on the qualities of good women and their role in the society as wife and mother. So women were not supposed to be anything else apart from being a wife and a mother. And Bhai Veer Singh was the founder of the Khalsa Tract Society that propagated this kind of a very constrictive and oppressive idea. So the point that we have been trying to establish is that conservative sections of the society felt apprehensive about the spread of Western education and ideas among the masses, and specifically the women. Because by attending Western education, because by thinking in new terms, these women were now in the process of overthrowing the existing social order. And conservative sections of the society were afraid about this, because they did not want the existing social order that placed male at the top of the hierarchy and female at the lowest rung of the hierarchy to be overthrown in any kind of way. Which is why they feared that by attaining education, women might overturn the existing social order and absolutely destroy the sacrosanct unit of the family. Because the family is considered a very sacrosanct unit since it is founded on the ideology of patriarchy. In a family, it is the husband who has the upper hand in everything. So it is his say that is final in the household. And if women attain education, they will now destroy this sacrosanct social order of the family and male privileges. Let us now look at this illustration, which is simply a manifestation of this apprehension about women's education. Here we see a man on whom is perched his wife. Now this wife seems almost like a ghost-like figure who is hovering on this man. Now the head of this man is under the control of this woman, which is to say that his thought processes, his ideas are now completely controlled by this woman. And this woman looks tyrannical enough, and under the evil influence of this woman, this man has put his mother under a noose. So in this way, this man is now henpecked, so to speak. This man is now under the complete influence of his evil wife. So these kinds of illustrations tell us how men were apprehensive about the spread of Western liberal education among women. So in this lesson, we have talked at great length on the print culture in India and the impact that it had left on women's lives in colonial India. In our subsequent lesson, we will take this discussion forward by talking about how this print culture had given birth to a new culture of questioning among the Indian masses. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.